So we have one more chapter to finish. I know that last time we were reading this book, we were talking about how Walter was lost and they couldn't find him. If we are playing with the chat bar, I will have to delete it. So please do not use the chat unless you're an adult trying to talk to the teacher. Okay? All right. So for today, I want to teach you that the best part of reading stories isn't that you go on great adventures. It's that you meet all of these interesting characters along the way. So if you remember any of the characters' names from this story, I want you to raise your hand. It could be any of the characters. Who remembers any of their names? You guys remember this girl's name right here? Go ahead and raise your hand. Cruz, was that you?
I think that was Jose.
Jose, can you tell me her name? Right here. Iris and Walter. Do you remember that, Jose?
I did.
Okay. So, first graders, when I look at the title of my book, I notice that we have two really important characters in our story, Iris and Walter. So those must be the main characters of our story. They're super important that the author decided I want to include their names in the title. Just like our book, Zelda and Ivy, those were the two characters that they talked about the most, and so they put their names in the title. Think about all of those other books that we read that have the name of the characters in the title. We've been reading the Piggy and Gerald books. Jose, make sure you raise your hand before unmuting. That lets me call on you, okay? We have Piggy and Gerald books. We have the Iris and Walter book. We have Zelda and Ivy. Sophia, I see you're raising your hand.
Should we read a Piggy and Gerald after we do this chapter?
We have another book with some new characters to introduce after this book. But as a read aloud, I can do the Piggy and Gerald's, okay? Okay. So, as I'm looking through my story, I want to see if I can discover any more new characters, okay? So, I'm going to finish reading this chapter 4, and we're going to be listening for more characters. If you hear a character in the story, I want you to raise your hand, okay? So, right here, Walter is lost, and they can't find him anywhere. But then, Iris spots him over here by the coral reef. So I'm going to keep on reading. Walter, we've been looking for you everywhere, said Iris. Huh? Said Walter. I was so worried, said Iris. Why? Said Walter. Because you were lost, said Iris. I was? He asked. If you see any characters' names in here, I want you to raise your hand, and I'm going to circle them with my pencil. Do you see any character names here? Oh, raise your hand, please. Zayden, thanks for raising your hand. Do you see a character's name?
Iris.
Iris. Iris. They talk about Iris a lot in the book. Do you think she's an important character?
Yeah.
Me too. Itziana, I'm going to have you go to Señorita Garcia's link for reading, okay? Thank you. Liam, do you see any more characters? Walter, nice job. I see Walter. They talk about him a lot in the book too. So he must be super important character. What I want us to start discovering as we read these books is, what is this character about? What do they say? What do they do? What do they like? What do they dislike? We want to know more and more about each of these main characters. So as we are reading this last part of the book, I want you guys to be thinking about who Walter is, what kind of things he does, and who Iris is. Okay? So for our new chart, we are meeting characters along the way. Our first card for our strategy is to learn more about those characters that we read. So, we're going to keep on going. Oh, and there's Iris here one more time. Because you were lost, said Iris. I was, he asked. Iris and Miss Cherry gave Walter a big hug. I'm very happy to see you, Walter, said Miss Cherry. And now I think it's a good time to have our picnic, don't you? All right, we've already talked about Walter, and we've already talked about Iris. Is there a third character on this page? Nicholas, can you tell me if you see a third character? Miss Cherry, their teacher. So she's talked about in this book a lot, but she's not in the title of the book. The two main characters are Iris and Walter, but Miss Cherry is in the story quite a bit. Outside the Oh, my turn. My turn. Outside, the sun was shining. Iris and Walter played tag with their friends. They sat under a tree and shared their lunches. Time to go, said Miss Cherry. So again, we saw Iris, Walter, and Miss Cherry. When the bus pulled up in front of the school, Grandpa was waiting. How was the field trip? He asked. Paulina, do you hear another character in this story? Paige, do you hear another character in this story?
Yeah.
Who else is in our book? I'm gonna read it one more time, Paige. When the bus pulled up in front of the school, Grandpa was waiting. How was the field trip? He asked.
That was a grandpa there?
I'm waiting for Paige. Grandpa, nice job. There is a grandpa here. So, first graders, I am going to have you stay with me instead of going to reading groups today. And the reason I'm going to do that is because we've had quite a few interruptions, and so I'm not done with my lesson, so I can't send you guys over yet. So what I'm going to do is let Mrs. Wilson know that I'm not sending students over to groups today, okay? Because we've had a lot of interruptions, and it makes me kind of sad because I really want to teach you guys this. So let's make sure we're keeping our respect on our Zoom meetings and that we are showing everyone respect by taking turns, okay? So I really hope tomorrow that we can do our reading groups, but for today, I have to skip them because we're not being focused enough on this lesson. Okay, so I heard somebody tell me that Grandpa is another character. Now I want you guys to think about this. Do we know a lot about the Grandpa, or do we know more about Iris and Walter? Who do we know more
Iris
about?
and Walter.
Oh, we need to raise our hand, please. Jose, who do we know more about? Walter and Iris or Grandpa?
Iris and Walter.
Iris and Walter. That's right. So Grandpa is what we would call a secondary character. So he is in the story, but we don't know a lot about him. What we do know is that he was talking to them at their dinner table. But that's about it. That's about all we know about him. And we also know that he's waiting outside the bus. It was fabulous, said Walter. We saw angelfish and hermit crabs. And Walter got lost, said Iris. Oh no, said Grandpa. Again, we have Walter. We have Walter again, Iris, and Grandpa. But I didn't know I was lost, said Walter. And I found him, said Iris. Then Iris and Walter told Grandpa the whole story, all the way home. And there's the last picture in the book. So, what I would like for us to do, first grade, is really think about our main characters of our story. So I'm going to pull up my chart here. And I want to learn more about these two main characters, okay? I want to write Iris and Walter. And what we're going to do is really dig in and see what we can identify about these two characters, okay? So, by reading the story, what do we know about Iris? What can we decide about Iris? I'm looking for a student raising their hand. Elias, can you tell me something about Iris? It could be anything that you learned about her from the story. Does Iris have a friend? Who's Iris's friend? Walter. So we could say friend of Walter. What kind of things did Iris like at the aquarium? What are the things that she liked? Let's see if we can have a picture help us out. So I see her pointing at some of the fish. Ooh. Sharks, said Benny. They look mean, said Iris. So what can we say about Iris? Landon, can you give me more information? we're going to add to our chart. So she was afraid of
the sharks.
sharks. Yeah, she's afraid of sharks. So do you see that by rereading and going back, we can learn even more about these characters in our story?
Yeah.
We know that she's friends with Walter and she's afraid of sharks. What else did she do? Who did she help find?
Walter.
She found Walter. Found Walter. Okay. I want to talk about Walter now. So now that you guys understand what kind of stuff I'm looking for, who can help me discover more about Walter? I'm going to pull up the book, and if you know something about Walter that happened in the story, I want you to raise your hand. What does Walter like? Ooh, this picture will help. What does Walter like? Cadence, can you help me?
He likes the coral reef.
Coral reef. Nice job. I like your vocabulary. Likes. Oops. Likes coral reef. So, we're discovering what characters like and dislike. So I don't think that Iris liked the sharks very much, but Walter really likes the coral reef. What happened to Walter in the story? I would like somebody to raise their hand. Mason, what happened to Walter in the story?
Walter got lost.
He got lost, right? Walter was lost. Did he know he was lost? No, he didn't know he was lost. He stayed at that coral reef the whole time. He didn't know he was lost. Petra, can you give me one more thing about Walter? It can be maybe something he says or does or how he dresses or what he likes. Anything from the story about Walter.
Oh, he looked like someone else.
He looked like Nick, right? He had the same shirt as Nick. So, we just discovered our other character from the story. Looks like Nick. So, through rereading and really digging deep into this story, we learned more about our main characters. So,